So today we've got an interview with a sort of behind-the-scenes local legend from this area around Boardroom in Deeside. Now, for a little bit of context, North Wales has always struggled with a lack of low to mid-grade sport climbing, and that has made it quite difficult for people to get into the sport up until the person we're interviewing today released the first edition of the A55 Sport Guide. By doing that, it's brought tons of really accessible sport climbing in the A55 area to the local climbing community. So today we're going to interview him as he has released a third edition of that book, which has double or triple the amount of crags and climbs it had in the first edition. So with us today, we've got Michael Doyle from the A55 Sport Climbing Guide.
Yeah,
hi, Mike.
Very exciting, very exciting. Yeah, let's go.
So first of all, how did you start climbing?
I'd been working in an office and I was 18 at the time and I didn't want that for the rest of my life and go to the pub every night. So I joined the Air Force and I got posted to RAF Waddington in Lincoln with a guy who'd been on the Whitehaven Mountain Rescue. And he says, well, I'm going up to see about the climbing club. And I didn't have any real interest in the time. So I thought, well, I'll go along with you and see what it's all about. And something clicked.
Yeah.
And that was in 1970.
And what was the climbing scene like in the 70s?
Well, yeah, so there was no sport climbing at all, of course. It was all trad. Gear was rudimentary. I mean, nylon was used by the time I got in. It wasn't putting pebbles in cracks anymore. And not so much me, but what those guys did in the early days was absolutely incredible. I mean, Joe Brown's first route on Cloggy was Digliffe in 1953, I think it was.
When you started climbing, were these people like significant role models?
Oh, absolutely. Brown and Willans, we used to see them in the Badon Lake Hotel. That was the hangout. And Joe Brown was one of the main activists at the time, you know, and Don Willans was there as well. And absolutely, you know, they were definitely inspirational role models.
So when did you begin climbing in the A55 area?
And for 8 years, I got out of climbing. I was working offshore for 2 weeks, coming back home and looking after the kids and doing the house up and stuff like that. So I really got out of it for 8 years and put a bit of weight on, actually. And when sort of things lightened up a bit, I thought, well, I'd like to get back into it again. So I joined the Clwyd Mountaineering Club and started climbing with them. And at this period of time, which is probably early 90s, sport climbing was just kicking off. Mm-hmm. So there's sport climbing on the Ormes then.
And was the Orme, which is in Llandudno, was that a significant, like, location for sport climbing being created in the UK?
Oh, it was very much so, yeah. Well, LPT was, of course. And also above the Marine Drive was very popular.
Why did sport climbing specifically take on in Llandudno when it was kind of shunned, it seemed like? Elsewhere?
Yeah, well, I think we have a very healthy ethic in this country, the difference between trad climbing and sport climbing. Sport climbing is really restricted to crags where you couldn't get any protection in, little or none.
Yeah.
And the balance seems to work very well. And the little or none applies to the limestone crags, but which by their very nature tend to be steep. And
okay.
So, and you wouldn't be able to climb them unless there was, well, not safely.
That meant there was no
competition
between the sport and the trad people for...
No, I don't think there was. I don't think there was, you know, and nobody these days would think of putting a bolt in on any mountain crag at Snowdonia. You know, it's very healthy.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
And what then, when you started climbing the A55, was it a popular area then, or has it grown?
No, not at all. No, there was no sport climbing on the A55.
None whatsoever?
None. And what happened was I used to go down to the Orme to climb with my son, Chris. And coming back along the expressway, you could say expressway wall, you know.
That's at Penman Head.
At Penmine Head, indeed. And I thought, well, that looks like a pretty decent crag up there, you know. And Chris said, oh, you're wasting your time when you think about the acres of rock they got in France and all that. Yeah. So anyway, I went up to have a look. And a lot of it on the right-hand side is in that little bit of a ravine, so you can't see it from the A55 expressway wall. It's pretty clean. And I had to break off branches and the brush in order to get under that wall, Penmine Ross wall on the right.
Yeah.
And obviously, this was a major venue. An expressway wall is, well, if you've climbed there, you'll know it's the most beautiful rough limestone, you know, tremendous climbing.
Pretty rare as well.
Yeah, I couldn't believe what I'd found. And a lot of climbers, they're always looking at crags. They're always looking for new routes. I think most climbers do that.
So Penman Head was the start of
it was the start of the A55. And
it's still a very popular crag.
It's still a very popular crag, and it's great climbing. And there now, there's 62 routes. You know, it's a major venue. So that's how it came about. So once we got on developing Penmine Head, we started elsewhere. It spread. It spread to Llandynlas Cave. It spread to Castle Inn.
Yeah.
When we're developing Penmine Head, I thought, well, you know, obviously we've got to publicise it. So maybe a laminated copy would do for climbers. There's no point keeping it to yourself. So the first one came out, and it had 6 crags in, and that was in 2010. 1,500 copies were printed, and that gave a further spur to development.
Yeah.
And after about 18 months, the second edition came out.
In 18 months?
In 18 months, yeah.
And how many more crags was that?
Well, it went from 6 to 13.
6 to 13.
Yeah. Nice. It really gave a boost, and a lot of people got into it. And,
a lot of people got into climbing via these guides?
Well, via the guides, but into new routing, you know, and really
kind of like a gold rush.
Well, it was indeed, and there was a lot to go at as well.
Yeah,
you know, and it spread to Dysyth, Tynewith, Dysyth. I mean, that crag had a huge ivy curtain going down.
I remember.
In the first place, Waterfall Crag and Dysyth Castle Slab.
A lot of these venues, it looks like would take a lot of work to clean up.
A hell of a lot of work. It takes about, well, for me, it takes about a day to establish a sport climb. That's my approach.
It's a huge amount of
It's a huge amount of graft. Yeah. When you develop in a route, first of all, you spot the line, then you need to clean it and try it, establish where the bolts are going to go, and then bolt it, and then you've got to lead it. And it's not an easy process. No. And very often when I've bolted a climb, going back to lead it, I'm thinking, hang on, these bolts are a bit far apart, you know, because I'm not very...
You've got no one to blame then.
Well, that's nobody to blame, because I'm not very bold at all, you know. Yeah. But it feels all right when you're doing the bolting, but not when you're leading. So it's very, very difficult. There's no such thing as perfect bolting. Yeah. It's very difficult to get the bolting right.
It certainly doesn't, when you buy a guide and you go climbing, doesn't initially dawn on you how much labour goes into those.
I don't think people realise.
No, it takes 10 minutes to do a sport climb and strip it. And
yeah. I don't think people realise. A lot of people seem to be averse to contributing towards the bolt fund and contributing towards, you know, the upkeep of the crags that they're climbing on.
What motivation drives you to put up? Because it seems quite altruistic to do that. I mean, obviously you've got you sell the guides, but what's your internal motivation for that?
It might seem altruistic, and I could admit to that, but it's not at all altruistic. No, it's a very, very satisfying process.
Oh, okay.
Establishing new climbs. It's a creative process. Yeah. And sometimes I come back and just look at a route and say, you know, I made that route. And you're down as the first ascensionist forever. Yeah. Nobody can take that away.
Is it like a natural progression for some climbers? A way of giving back?
It doesn't. Obviously, new routing doesn't appeal to everybody. No, everybody's different. I would have thought it appeals to very, very few people. Well, it seems to. Otherwise, there'd be more people new routing.
Yeah.
But
There's definitely a sensation that all of the possible rock has been found.
yeah.
Like we were mentioning beforehand, but how do you keep finding new crags?
Well,
You see, I would never have thought there was an extra 10 or 12 crags in the A55.
yeah, it's on, and it is quite astonishing that there's not just new routes that are coming out of the woodwork, but it's new crags as well.
New crags.
Yeah.
As a climbing instructor in this area, the lack of easy sport climbing can really hamper people's enjoyment of the sport.
Indeed.
In places like Spain and Turkey, there's quality lines from 3 upwards.
Yeah.
For a time, it felt like if you couldn't climb 7A, there wasn't much for you.
Yeah. I mean, that's the problem with sport climbing. Sport climbing crags tend to be steep, particularly limestone.
Yeah.
And that means they're hard. And that means that it's difficult for people to get established outside.
Yeah.
And there is a dearth of low standard climbing for sport climbers. We're always looking at new crags.
Mm-hmm.
And the last but one level at Penmine Back Quarry, which you access via the Suckman Pass. Went up with a friend of mine and had a look at it, before it was developed. It's not much good. Ian Lloyd-Jones comes along and puts up a load of great routes. Why didn't we do anything? So that happens repeatedly.
Yeah.
We haven't seen the impact of it, or the potential. That's the better word. We haven't seen. It's there. We haven't seen it.
And I guess once it's all cleared and cleaned, and everything's taken off.
But
then it's easy to say.
You didn't need a load of cleaning either. Those routes were pretty clean as they were. And now I don't know how many routes there are. 30 to 40, I guess.
That's wild.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to any new climbers who are wanting to go out in this area, try outdoor climbing?
So start as low as you can and get a feel for the climbs. The grades outside are relatively consistent. That's my feeling. Yeah. So it doesn't matter which crag you go to, a 5 will basically be a 5.
Yeah.
So start low and get a lot of experience. And it doesn't matter how long you take, and work your way up slowly through the grades until you get a feel for it.
That's quality advice.
Yeah.
Finally, could you give us any recommendations for routes or crags that you feel are particularly stand out in the A55?
Well, one of my routes I'm particularly fond of is Indian Summer at Castle Inn on Fine View Wall.
Yeah? What stands out to you about that climb?
Well, it's just wonderful rough rock. It's a very good route. There's no real crooks on it. I just wish I'd put more bolts in. Yeah. And I'll do it myself.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, that's all the questions I've got.
Yeah.
Author of the A55 third edition.
Yeah.
If you live in the area or even in the northwest at all, pick yourself up a copy of this book. The crags contained within are fantastic. It's where I learned to sport climb, and that started a 10-year obsession that took me, up and down the country and around the world. But my first of the grades, many of my first of the grades were in the crags, which were in this book here in Penmine Head and in Castle Inn and places like that.
Yeah.
So for me personally and the local area, thank you. And go out and get yourself a copy of this guide.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, thanks very much for the endorsement and enjoyed the interview as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thanks, Freddie.
You're welcome.